A factory can have workers. It can have machines. It can have customers. It can even have access to capital. And still fail for one surprisingly simple reason: electricity. Because when power is unreliable or too expensive, almost everything else in an economy becomes more expensive. A factory has to stop production. A supermarket has to protect its refrigeration. A data center needs backup systems. A small business buys fuel for a generator instead of investing that money in expansion. And suddenly, electricity is no longer just an infrastructure problem. It becomes a competitiveness problem. That is the part of Africa's electricity crisis that is often missed. The question isn't simply, does Africa have enough electricity? The bigger question is, can African businesses get reliable electricity at a cost that allows them to compete? And this is where the story gets interesting. Because Africa's energy problem is also a money problem. Imagine two factories producing the same product. One operates in a market with reliable, affordable electricity. The other constantly deals with outages and has to maintain generators, buy fuel, service equipment, and manage interruptions. They may have equally skilled workers. They may use similar machines. But their economics are completely different. The second factory is effectively paying an additional tax just to keep operating. And that affects what happens next. Higher operating costs can mean higher product prices. Higher prices make local products less competitive. Lower competitiveness discourages investment. Less investment means fewer factories. Fewer factories mean fewer jobs and less demand for infrastructure. And that creates a vicious cycle. Energy weakness becomes economic weakness. Nigeria provides one of the clearest examples. Businesses have spent years dealing with unreliable grid electricity while relying heavily on private backup generation. That means money that could have gone into machinery, hiring workers, research, or expansion can instead disappear into fuel and generators. And this is the crucial point: the generator is not the solution to the economic problem. It is often the survival mechanism. The real solution is infrastructure that can deliver dependable electricity at scale. That requires much more than building power plants. You need generation. You need transmission. You need distribution. You need financially healthy utilities. And, critically, you need customers who can actually pay for the electricity. This is where investors enter the story. A power project may require hundreds of millions of dollars. An investor therefore wants to know, who will buy the electricity? Will they pay? Can the grid deliver it? Will the rules remain stable? And how will the project recover its investment? This is why something as simple as a long-term electricity contract can be incredibly important. It can turn electricity from an uncertain product into a predictable revenue stream. And predictable revenue is what helps infrastructure become bankable. That word matters. Because Africa doesn't only need more energy. Africa needs energy infrastructure that investors can finance, businesses can depend on, and economies can build around. Look at what happens when reliable power reaches productive industries. Cold storage becomes more viable. Mines can process more locally. Manufacturers can run more consistently. Digital businesses can operate data infrastructure. Water systems can expand. Transport systems can become more efficient. And entire industrial zones can become economically viable. This is why electricity is connected to almost every major economic question facing Africa. Energy affects money. Money affects investment. Investment creates infrastructure. Infrastructure enables industry. Industry creates jobs, exports, and tax revenue. And those things determine how quickly an economy can grow. So perhaps Africa's electricity problem is not really about darkness. It is about lost economic potential. Every hour a factory cannot operate has an economic cost. Every investment delayed because power is unreliable has a cost. Every business that spends scarce capital on emergency generation has a cost. And every industrial opportunity that moves somewhere else because electricity is cheaper and more reliable has a cost. But there is another side to this story. Africa has enormous energy resources, from solar and wind to hydropower, gas and geothermal energy. The challenge is turning those resources into reliable, investable infrastructure. That is the opportunity. Because the African economy of the future will not simply need more electricity. It will need electricity that is reliable enough for industry, affordable enough for businesses, and scalable enough to support entire cities and economies. And when that happens, electricity stops being merely something people consume. It becomes the foundation on which Africa produces, processes, exports, and grows. That may be the bigger story behind Africa's electricity crisis. The continent isn't simply trying to keep the lights on. It is trying to power an economic transformation. And whoever solves the electricity problem isn't just selling power. They are helping build Africa's industrial future. If you want to understand that future through the connection between energy, money, infrastructure, and industrialization, this is exactly what we'll keep following here. Because the biggest energy stories in Africa aren't really about megawatts. They're about what those megawatts make possible. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe to the channel. We break down the energy, money, and infrastructure shaping Africa's industrial and economic future, and explain what the numbers really mean for businesses, investors, and the continent. Like and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next analysis.